Good morning, colleagues. Before we can proceed, I would like to let you aware that this workshop is recorded. This is for the purpose of keeping the records of all the workshops that we are providing, as well as to allow all our participants to access the recording, as well as all the workshop resources at their later stage, which will be convenient for them. My name is Osie Tuntuli. I'm from the Research Capacity Development Unit at the Postgraduate School. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's workshop on effective public speaking in academia. Whether you are a postdoctoral student, an early career academic, or a seasoned researcher, we all know that the ability to communicate ideas clearly and confidently is an essential skill in academia, and one that can often be a deciding factor in how our research is received and understood. We are honored to be joined by Dr. Lorenzo David, who will be facilitating today's workshop. Before I can hand over to Dr. Lorenzo David, I would just like to firstly go through some housekeeping rules. I will enable all your mics. If you do have any questions, we kindly request you to make use of a hand raise or under Q&A, or type your question under the chat. We encourage effective collaboration, as well as any input that you may have. You can just type under the chat or alternatively raise a hand. Once your mic have been unmuted, we kindly request you colleagues to make sure that there is no background noise from your side, unless you are speaking or you have contribution or a question. That is whereby you can unmute your mic and ask or make any contribution. A feedback form will be shared to the chat. We kindly request you to take your 2 minutes and fill that feedback in. It helps us in terms of planning a workshop of this kind, as well as to improve our service delivery, and also give feedback to our facilitators for taking their time in facilitating this workshop that we are providing here at the RCD unit. And also, it also ensures that you get a certificate of attendance as a participant to ensure that you get recognition that you have attended this kind of workshop. With that being said, now colleagues, allow me to introduce our facilitator, Dr. Lorenzo David. Dr. Lorenzo David is currently a coordinator at the Research Capacity Development Unit, Postgraduate School at the University of Johannesburg. Dr. Lorenzo David was recently awarded a PhD in biochemistry for his assessment of transferring gold palladium and gold palladium bimetallic nanoparticles and their potential for anti-cancer drug delivery at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. By adapting a holistic approach to education, Dr. Lorenzo hopes to inspire students to achieve personal and academic success with a hands-on and learner-centric approach to value-based learning. Once again, thank you, colleagues, for joining us, and thank you to Dr. Lorenzo David for taking his time in facilitating this workshop of today. We look forward to a productive and an insightful session. So, colleagues, just a quick announcement to those that have been receiving emails or regarding their certificate for April. We have sent out all certificate for April and March and Feb. So if you didn't get your certificate of attendance, we kindly request you to email us back. However, even if your certificates came back with some errors, because we understand that some colleagues, they were using just a direct link to join the session, so we didn't have their full details. So we kindly request you colleagues to email us back your full details, and we will be happy to rectify that and send you back the updated certificate. I have received some quiet emails from yesterday. Colleagues, I will attend to those certificates as of today. So after this workshop, all those all those that have requested a certificate to be corrected, I will be sending those certificates today. Thank you once again, colleagues. Thank you so much, Dr. Lorenzo. I now hand over the session to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nkosi. I just want to quickly check if everyone can hear me clearly before I start sharing my slides. Just a simple thumbs up would be good, please.
I can hear you clearly on my side. I don't
Okay.
know if the colleagues can hear you, Doc.
Okay, so if anyone is unable to hear me, I think it could be an issue where you could maybe leave the meeting and rejoin, or even if there's any issues with my slides, anyone can just let me know and I'll stop at any point. So I'm just going to share my slides and then hopefully we can get started on this topic, which I think is actually quite interesting. So I'm just sharing my slides. Mr. Nkosi, can you just confirm if you're able to see my slides and if they're moving?
Yes, Doc, everything is fine on my side. Colleagues, you can confirm if you are able to see Dr. Lorenzo's slide.
Okay, so once again, I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to this session and thank you for making the time to join us once again. We hope this is going to be something that is useful and develop some practical skills in which we can use when we move forward throughout our academic career. So the topic for today is effective public speaking in academia. And I think that it is something that, as we can see by the turnout, it is something that many of us hope to improve on, and myself included. So we're just going to go through some of the challenges. What are the points of what is the point of academic, speaking in terms of academia, as well as some of the techniques and tips that we can use to improve our confidence and obviously allow us to translate the story that we have much better. I think that is one of the key issues which we will discuss later on. When it comes to public speaking in academia specifically, very often we will put in the hard hours in the lab or in front of our computer, and we will come up and we obviously research our particular topic in detail, and we have a great amount of knowledge on it. The last stage of this is being able to translate this or share this story with the rest of the world. And obviously this relates to in terms of our academic writing, which we will run workshops on later on, as well as public speaking, because at the end of the day, something that I always say is that each of us values the research that we're doing. And because we value it, we don't want our research to simply sit on a shelf somewhere and just allow us to get a degree or another tick in terms of a publication. We want to effect real change in the real world. So I think the way in which we tell the story, that being our research in the form of public speaking, is actually very important. So just to quickly go through the agenda, and I'd just like to apologize. I'm recovering from the flu, so I may not be as clear as usual, but please bear with me. We just like to go through the agenda. So obviously we're going to go through a bit of an introduction and like we've just done a workshop overview. We're thereafter going to go on to some of the foundations of academic public speaking, how to go about crafting your presentation, some of the delivery techniques, and maybe some of the key points that we should be aware of. And obviously, when it comes to speaking in a public forum, each and every one of us will have a different approach. I know some people like to have like to be more structured in terms of the specific points, what they're going to say, in the order in which they're going to say it. If I look at some other colleagues, they will just have key points up on their slides and they would prefer to talk to it because in that way it seems more of a conversation. And I think delivery techniques really links up with how obviously the audience is going to receive the message that we are trying to spread at this point. We thereafter going to touch a bit on visuals or the use of visuals and multimedia, as well as how do we go about engaging with our audience. Now, we will agree that when it comes to an online platform, it's generally a bit more challenging to engage with your audience for various reasons. But I think when we are in person, be it presenting at a conference, be it presenting in front of a class, delivering lectures, then it becomes a bit more easy because obviously we have that face-to-face contact, and I don't think that can ever be replicated, in my personal opinion. We're also going to go through the importance of practice and continuous improvement, as with anything in life. And as all of us here being researchers, we understand that nothing happens overnight. Skills are not going to be developed overnight, and certainly not within a presentation that is an hour long. But I hope that it will at least guide us in the right direction. And many of us, I'm sure, are actually very good at presenting. Maybe we're just looking for particular areas that we'd like to strengthen on as well. And that's why when we develop this presentation, we try to cover as many aspects as possible, because maybe different aspects will actually resonate with different members of the audience. Then we'll go through overcoming some of the challenges, and I'll speak a bit from my personal experience here. By no way, shape, or form do I profess to be an expert at public speaking, but I think that we've learned some things over the years, and we would like to share. At the same time, I would just like to once again remind the audience, please, if there's at any point you'd like to make a contribution in terms of maybe a technique that has worked for you, maybe there's a certain approach that you've taken to overcome some of the challenges in your own public speaking, we welcome discussion. The point of this is that we can each learn from each other, and in that way, we actually covering a wider scope. We will cover some of the resources. There's not too much on this, to be honest, but I will provide these in the presentation that will be uploaded onto the Moodle community. So once again, please make sure that you are registered on that. And then obviously we'll leave some time for questions and answers. So I always think it's important for us to provide a bit of background in terms of, what is the primary aim of public speaking in academia? And very often when it comes to, let's just say we're attending a conference and we're giving an oral presentation, the focus generally is on, am I going to speak well? Am I going to be able to clearly communicate my research, which shows positive results or basically is highlighting something new? But I think it's also important for us to understand holistically that when it comes to public speaking academia, one of the primary aims is to communicate our research and our ideas clearly and persuasively, as well as to allow the largest audience as possible to be able to understand what we are trying to say. So very often when we go and, if we're researching certain topics, you'll see these fantastic presenters online, these very accomplished researchers. And sometimes we come across these researchers who, when they present, their work is so complicated, but they may make it even more complicated in the way that they explain it. And I think that's something that maybe we would, it'll be a good discussion point in terms of sometimes we may have a complex idea, but trying to explain it as simply as possible may have greater benefit than obviously the opposite. Another aim of public speaking academia is actually to share knowledge as well as to foster academic discourse. So we understand that academia is built upon robust discussion, and that is how we learn from each other as well. So creating an environment where this is possible obviously only leads to the field actually moving forward. It also assists with building a professional reputation, and I've just put in influence there in terms of your students. So if we are obviously taking a class and we're privileged to actually lecture a class, we understand that first we'll say how you present your work actually matters. And obviously that is what students look at first. They may not look at this content is actually 100% sound, but also how you present it also plays a role in how obviously they will receive that information. And it also allows us or provides support in forms of teaching, collaboration, as well as our leadership roles. So in terms of the challenges many of us as researchers face in effective public speaking, the first one would be nervousness and a lack of confidence. And I'd just like to speak to this for a minute or two. We all understand that we've all been in this position, be it from primary school up to now, maybe the first time we had to present to a new research group, that there is an air of nervousness that arises when we have to go into a public platform and speak in front of many people. But I think the one thing I'd like to highlight is that it is a normal thing for us to be nervous before we are addressing, obviously, say a large group of people. When it comes to lack of confidence, the way that I always like to think about it is if we are presenting on our research, specifically on our research, we need to remember that we have the greatest amount of knowledge on that particular topic. So a lack of confidence sometimes is, I think we just need to remind ourselves and speak to ourselves positively in terms of, I have spent maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years on this particular topic, and I have a deep understanding of it. And I think having these conversations with ourselves, even leading up to the presentation, actually goes a long way. I think when it comes to presentations, that nervousness can actually dissipate after the first or second slide once we get the ball rolling. It's only that initial phase when we go up and we're trying to, engage with the audience, does it actually play a part? So I would say when we go on to, to speak or to offer a presentation, maybe the first slide or two, just take it a bit easy, take it a bit slow, go through the points that you want to, and you'll notice that once you see that you are doing well, that you can do this, everything else just flows. And thereafter, your presentation becomes a conversation in terms of where you are leading the conversation and the audience is actually following what you're trying to say. We know there's also issues in terms of engaging the audience. And this is something that, like I said, is much easier when you are in person because you are able to judge body language, you're able to judge the level of interest, and thereafter you can, for example, if you're going through your presentation and you notice the attention span in the room is actually dropping, what you can actually do then is obviously pose a question or bring up an icebreaker or something to get everyone engaged once again. So I think engagement in terms of the audience is something that we will learn as we continue to grow. And if we look at some of the, I always make mention of some of the fantastic professors and, the senior professors and the associate professors and senior lecturers that we have at UJ, we look at their presentations and we just like, wow, how is this possible for a person to present so well? But I think obviously we need to remember this comes with time and we will stumble, we will have issues, but we just have to push forward and as with anything in life, we will get better with time. Some of the other challenges we may face in terms of poor organization and structure, that's especially when we're relating to our presentation. We need to, when we're developing our presentation, remember that there needs to be a clear logical flow between each of our points. And many of us would do this, but I think the way in which we structure sometimes will assist us in our presentation. Your slides actually does the work for you because you already have the knowledge. The slides is just reminding you of basically providing a route for you to follow. So by generating your slides in a way that may have just your key points, in that way you are able to obviously prevent anything in terms of structure issues. And then we go lack of preparedness. Sometimes we have a presentation that comes up at the last minute. And what do we do in that case there? I think in that case, you need to understand, you need to take all of the factors into consideration that in this specific case, if it's a presentation that you were told about the night before, or there's some sort of change that happens in terms of delivering a lecture, you do the best that you can. But obviously, we're always aiming for excellence as many times as often as we can. And I think if we look at it as a whole, lack of preparedness in terms, if that falls on the actual facilitator or the presenter, then that is something that we can obviously avoid through proper planning and preparation, as well as time management. And that leads us on to time management. So when we presenting as well, I think it's important for us to be aware of the time, as well as the ability of the audience to actually pay attention. Now, we would have heard when we each came into university, why are university lectures or lectures between 45 to 55 minutes? And studies maybe conducted a while ago actually came up. They understood that an individual can only maintain proper concentration for a specific period of time without taking a break. So I think time management in terms of our actual presentation, we need to take this into consideration. Maybe have, present on a particular topic and then have a small section for questions and discussion, or maybe take some questions from the audience. And in that way, it allows us to actually overcome this and also allows us to keep the audience engaged, because the last thing we want to do is have a fantastic presentation on a very important topic, but we are losing our audience due to obviously us going on too long or our passion in terms of a particular topic. So what is the impact of these challenges that we've discussed in terms of, us presenting, as well as what is the effect of that on our work? I would say some of the ones we've highlighted is reduced credibility. If we go on and sometimes we can't get to a point, it can get people to question, does this presenter actually know what they're talking about, or, are they not aware of certain aspects, whatever it may be. We could also result in audience disengagement, which is something that we try to avoid at all costs, as well as missed opportunities. Every presentation is an opportunity for us to share our knowledge, to help one another, as well as to present the research that we're doing. Every presentation is important, and we should treat every presentation as such. So never miss an opportunity, grab it with both hands, and I think that would be something good for us. So we understand what presentations or public speaking in terms of academia is. We understand some of the common challenges. I think it's also important for us to understand, or remember rather, the academic audience. And your presentation style will vary depending on the audience that you are presenting to. For example, this is a generic example, if you are presenting your research, and you are presenting it to 3 levels. Let's just say a high school invited you to present your research to motivate students on what is possible if they work hard. If you are presenting to your research group, and then if you are presenting at your Viva, let's say Viva for your PhD, or you're presenting at a conference, you will have to target your explanations and the levels of detail according to the audience, obviously, that is present. So in that case, we'll take into consideration what is the academic background, what is their interest, and what is their expectations. So if we take the example of the conference, if it is a conference specifically on your research area, then you are obviously more than welcome to go as in detail as possible, as much as time allows, and that which will add to your presentation. However, if it is a general conference or maybe a university conference that you're actually attending, maybe then you will want to discuss the key points and leave the specifics open for discussion if there's a particular question that arises. I think it's also important for us to take cultural and obviously your disciplinary diversity into account. Over the course of the past couple of months, we've come into contact with students from various different faculties, everything from science to business to economics to law to humanities. And one thing that I've noticed is that this allows us to actually expand how we see academic presentations, how we see actually academic writing, because each discipline, each faculty will be different in terms of what they consider to be important versus not in terms of their presentations. So I think it's important for us to also take that into account and also vary our presentations according to that. In terms of your cultural, cultural considerations, I think maybe something such as maintaining direct eye contact with someone who is senior to you, maybe within different cultures, this may be seen as disrespect. So we will have to obviously take that into consideration. And then when we start moving through this, we start seeing that public speaking is more than just developing a good presentation, that looks good on PowerPoint. There's so many different factors that come into play that actually will govern what dictates a good presentation. And something that I'd like to highlight as well is that while we aim for excellence, it is almost impossible for us to please everyone. And there will always be negative comments or maybe constructive comments in terms of our presentation. And I would just like to motivate each and every one of us to focus more on those than the positive, because we can learn more from our mistakes than we do from obviously our successes. Obviously, our mistakes teach us things that we are not doing correct, and that we can correct it in the next iteration of our presentation. So just a bit something to add on there. I think we've discussed this in terms of level of expertise. So are we presenting to peers, students, or maybe interdisciplinary groups? And then we can tailor our presentation in that manner. Now, tailoring your presentation does not mean completely removing sections and content. It may just mean adjusting the level of detail in which you are speaking. So if someone is speaking to me about, let's just say, gene delivery, I have an idea on the field, but obviously I don't know, I'm not very technical in terms of the specific genes which are currently being used in a particular study. So if they just come at me with, I've used the LAC1 or the sucralase gene or whatever else it may be, I will end up being lost, and the message actually gets lost because I can't follow their train of thought. So maybe it's something for us to think about. And then we go into the last point, which would be tailoring your content for delivery for maximum relevance. So Often when we writing our thesis, when we're writing a paper, we feel that everything is necessary. And I used to come across this a bit, and I had many discussions with my supervisor in terms of, Prof, I really think that we should discuss this aspect of the mechanism, or, I feel like this outcome would actually be important. But as we go through academia, we'll actually learn, and I'm 100% still learning myself in terms of, yes, there are a lot of aspects which are important, but which aids to the topic and which aids to the message that we're actually trying to deliver. So I think our ability to tailor content, and many of us will be very accomplished at this stage, but there's always room for improvement. So I think many of the skills that we learn in terms of academic writing can actually be brought forward in terms of our presentations as well. So at this stage, if there's any questions, please feel free to unmute and jump in at any point. I'll just go through the presentation, but then if you want to raise a hand, post a message in the chat, Mr. Nkosi will be there to bring it to my attention. Okay, so these are some general facts that I thought would be interesting for us to include here, just because obviously we want to cater to as many people as possible. So how do we go about structuring an effective academic presentation? You'll remember I said previously that when it comes to us, an effective academic presentation, it relates to the structure of our actual presentation. How do we present the information, our use of visuals, etc.? So in terms of structure, there should be a clear structure in terms of our introduction. You're providing the background to your study, just as you would for a journal, just as you would for a progress meeting. The body, which contains obviously your data, your methodology, your discussion, your results, that kind of thing, as well as a conclusion where we tie up all loose ends for the audience. And every question that we have posed, or maybe everything as much as possible, we will bring to a head and we will give a firm answer on. At the end of a presentation, people should not be wondering, oh, I wonder what that result means, or what that result means, if you had highlighted it as a potential point of concern throughout your presentation. So in terms of our introduction, we obviously want to state the topic, what is the purpose of this research, and outline the main points. What is going to be covered in terms of this presentation? What can you hope to expect? And by doing this, we give the audience a glimpse into what is coming. And in that case, there may be one or two points which they are actually very interested in because it relates to their own work. And therefore, this will improve their actual attention in terms of the presentation. In your body, it's important for us to organize our key arguments logically. Now, I always think about anything from academic writing to academic presentations as it is a conversation between myself and the audience. Even with academic writing, I am telling a story and the audience is a silent member of the conversation. They need to be able to logically understand the flow of my arguments and why I chose this particular methodology. Why did I think this particular set of results was actually important? So sometimes it actually will benefit us to, after we're done with the presentation, go back maybe the next day or a couple hours later when your mind is a bit fresh and look at it from the perspective of a member of the audience. Is what I'm trying to say clear? Because we need to remember when we are working on something, often there will be many, many hours put into it. And we forget at times that the audience does not have the same background in terms of the depth of knowledge that we do. This is in some cases, right? So we need to ensure that obviously our arguments are logical and that maybe certain key factors are also included so we can guide the audience through our presentation. And it's always important for us to use evidence as well as examples. And then simply in terms of the conclusion, I think it's important for us to summarize what are some of the key points, as well as reinforce the significance of the study, as well as leave the floor open to questions. Okay, so now we're going to go into some delivery techniques and maybe some points for us to actually watch out for when we are actually delivering a presentation. So the first one we'd like to speak on would be, how do we go about adapting our voice? So the first point would be clarity. How clear are we in our communication? Now, I understand that many of us, many of us may not inherently have the ability to present our work clearly, but this can be achieved through practice, is what I'm trying to say. The next one would be pace. I mean, many of us would have sat in presentations previously where you can see that the presenter is nervous. You look at their slides and it looks fantastic, but because of their nervousness, they actually rush through the slides. And what does that do? It basically removes from the actual presentation. We're not able to understand, we're not able to digest, and obviously that takes away from the presentation. So being clear in our communication, I think, is very important. Also pacing ourselves. So we understand if we have 10 minutes for a particular presentation, we should have a general idea. Okay, I'm going to spend 2 minutes on the introduction, 6 minutes on my body, or let's just say 6 minutes on my methodology, results, and discussion, and another 4 minutes wrapping up and taking questions and answers. So by us having this general idea on what the timeframes are, it allows us to pace ourselves through our presentation. And obviously that just comes across clearly and it's more well received. And then voice modulation. So essentially, I think if we think back to any time when we sat in a lecture hall and, okay, I can speak from personal experience. There was sometimes lectures which happened where everything would happen in a single tone. And what would happen is 15 minutes in, you'd be looking outside the window, or you'd be, your attention would basically not be on the content. So I think it's important for us to modulate our voice when we're presenting. So we have our key points is something where we will raise our voice and we will highlight it. We will show enthusiasm. We will basically change our voice depending on how we go through the presentation. And by doing so, we are able to keep the audience engaged. When they see that you are interested, they will also be interested. And this links up with obviously us monitoring the audience as well. So it's also important, in addition to your voice, what does your body language tell the audience? And I think this is something we actually can work on, immediately. When we are presenting, are we standing behind the podium? Are we looking down at our notes? Are we only looking at the slides? In terms of our posture, are we standing up straight? These are all things which will also assist you in your own confidence. So in terms of your body language, make eye contact with the audience. Now, you don't have to look directly at a particular person, but essentially look at the audience. Let them know that you're open, that you're connecting with them. The next thing would be gestures. I mean, uh, many people have pointed out to me that when I present, I use my hands a lot, and I often use it to emphasize a particular point. So, whatever is comfortable for you. So if there's a particular point, if you're a bit nervous, then you can use a pointer to highlight certain aspects on your presentation. Or you can even basically, you can be looking diagonally, shall we say. So your one shoulder is pointed towards the presentation up on the screen, and your other shoulder obviously will be pointed towards the audience. And in that way, you can just keep swiveling between. So if you are uncomfortable looking at the audience all the time, every few seconds or every few seconds, you can literally just turn around, make some contact, say something, and then turn back to your presentation. And that way, you are improving your contact with the audience. And like we've mentioned in terms of your posture, try to stand up straight, and just present yourself well. I mean, you're confident in your topic, you've put in the hard work. So this is your time to share your story. And I think that we should grab this opportunity with both hands. Something which leads into, in terms of the pace that we spoke about previously, would be pausing for emphasis, as well as allowing the audience to reflect on what you've said. Now, a presentation does not have to be 0 to 100 and we maintain that right until the end. There will be highs, there will be lows, there will be points that you want to highlight, and there will be points that you just want to get through to provide background for a key point coming up. So in that phase there, I think it's good for us to, obviously, in terms of modulation, emphasize certain points, as well as leave periods for the audience to reflect and formulate questions, within their own mind. And we'll see that actually improves engagement, because if any of us have been in a presentation previously and, someone says something, we have a question, we will wait for the next opportunity before we can ask it. But we are also being engaged in the actual presentation. And something that I think is very important would be, if we are presenting, it's important for us to test our technology. I think it was on the slide here, but here we go. Okay. So the use of visuals and multimedia. This is something that many of the presenters today actually use, and I think it is very interesting, and it can be a huge benefit in terms of the use of visuals and multimedia. And the reason for this is many people or many members of the audience may learn in different ways. I mean, if you go into, you go to a conference and you speak to 5 people, you ask them what is the best way that you, or what is the way you think the presentation should be formulated. Some people will say, I like text-heavy slides. Other people say, I like diagrams. Another person will say, I just like images. Another person will say, I just like key points. So we try to basically incorporate as many of these different aspects in our presentation. So obviously, we don't want our slides to be extremely text-heavy. We don't want paragraphs on each of our slides, but key points may be good because it allows you to speak to the topic. When it comes to visuals and multimedia, it's important for us to use visuals. And the key point here is to supplement, not to replace spoken content. So sometimes if I think about it in the context of my own work, if I have a particular mechanism I have to speak to, I can write down, or I can put into the slide the 15 or 16 different enzymatic reactions that happen. However, would this not be better received in the form of a diagram? So in the diagram, while you are speaking, you allow the audience, they will be able to actually read it themselves. And I think that is one of the key points in terms of improving engagement. People have the ability to multitask. I remember when I was in, I think it was my honors, and there was a professor that was in our department, and he was fantastic at presenting. But when it came time to, so when we had to sit with him to, to make changes to our presentation, I always remember the feedback that he gave me. And one of the key points was, this is what I'm telling you right now, in terms of why put a paragraph or a heavy text slide when everything can be explained in an image. And the point he highlighted to me was simple. People don't just want to read your slides, right? They want to listen to you and connect what you're saying with an image where possible, especially if it's dealing with a methodology or a protocol or a mechanism, and obviously, or an approach that we're taking for a particular research area. So I think that's something for us to consider. Now, as always, we'll notice they say avoid text-heavy slides, and it's important for us to use images, charts, and key points. This particular point, I would like to put a bit of a disclaimer. If we are presenting our research at a conference, if we are giving a presentation at a lecture, or anything of that sort, even if we're presenting at a particular event, then we would like to avoid using text-heavy slides. But think about it in the context of a student. If you are running an online session, right, and you're just providing to them a presentation in terms of a particular topic, in that case, it would be of benefit for you to add a bit more detail, because obviously the students will have access to the presentation. So I think using our judgment in this case would actually be of benefit. We need to ensure the accessibility and clarity of our visuals. Obviously, don't use any images which are of poor quality, and basically don't present anything that you don't have permission to present as well. And this is where the point actually comes up in terms of testing your technology beforehand. So if you have a link to a particular video, or if you have a particular video that you want to play in the context of the presentation, test this before to see if it actually works on that particular system. So audience engagement and interaction, how do we go about improving this? And this is something that we all are obviously always working on as well. And we will continue to learn. I think we will continue to learn up until the day that we retire, because every day we learn something new, especially working in an environment as dynamic as a university. So in terms of the techniques, invite questions and invite participation. The audience needs to feel part of this discussion. They are not here, like many of you, all of you are not here just to listen to me speak. I'm also here to listen to your point of view and for us to create discussion around it. So I think creating that environment in which the audience feels, you know what, questions are welcomed and we can actually bring up discussion points is actually important. Obviously, we will have to be a bit aware because very rarely, but sometimes you get instances where many questions are asked from the same person, and this is at the detriment of the presentation. So once again, we need to use our judgment in terms of audience engagement and spreading it out as wide as possible. So it's important for us to use, your real world examples in terms of when we're linking a particular theory or a particular explanation, shall we say. People always learn if there's something that they can relate to. I think back to, when you're trying to teach, say, high school students, and you're coming from a university setting, but you're trying to explain these concepts to them, be it in biology or chemistry, whatever it may be. And I remember at the beginning, I would come and I would, exactly as I would speak to maybe a university student, I would speak to the class, and I would just see this blank look across all of their faces. And then I realized that when it comes to, especially, high school kids and even primary school kids, they learn through examples of things that they can relate it to. So we can also implement that and use that in terms of our presentation. If we use real world examples in our presentation, people feel a connection with that. And by doing that, they obviously improves engagement as well. I think it's important for us to encourage discussion as well as feedback. Encourage discussion during the session, in your question and answer session, as well as be open to feedback. And I think this is very important for us as presenters and in terms of public speaking. We want to, like I said, we learn more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. And therefore, any feedback that we get, be it constructive, we can implement that and obviously uh, make it better. What are some of the benefits of basically some of these approaches and obviously maintaining active engagement? You maintaining your attention as well as deepening your understanding. And I think that's one of the key points here is that what is the goal of us presenting? And I know we've spoken about this previously, but what is the goal? Is it just that I feel good after the presentation, that I did a good job, but maybe the understanding was not there? Or should it be that I've been able to share this critical piece of knowledge with this group of people? And I think it is a mix because everyone, we're human, we want to feel as if we're doing a good job and we want to look for areas to improve on. But ensuring there's understanding in your audience is equally as important, in my opinion, as well. Okay, so we just over halfway. I won't take up too much more of your time. But if there's any questions, once again, please feel free to jump in at any point. So let's go through some presentation skills for academics. We would have discussed some of these previously, but I just want to go a bit more in detail, if that's okay. So we've mentioned this here, strategic content development. We want to craft messages tailored to the audience needs. So like we said, if we're presenting at a high school, if we're presenting at an open day versus if we're presenting at our Viva or at a conference, we will tailor the presentation depending to the audience which is going to be present. Something that is actually, I only came into contact with storytelling in terms of academia. I think it was a few years ago. A friend of mine actually was completing their master's and they actually went to a university in the Netherlands. And I think I've said this before. So in the Netherlands, there's, obviously there's support back then. I'm sure it's better now. They ran a specific course for their PhD students. And one of the actual courses that they ran was storytelling for academia. And basically, they had a person who studied, like, what are the dramatic arts, I think so, to actually develop a series of videos on how you go about telling a story. And they linked that to academic writing and academic presentation or academic presenting. And I think that's important for us to remember. And I've said this previously, when we are presenting, we are telling a story. So it does not have to be monotone. It does not have to be only tables and graphs. We're telling a story. So we are able to use narratives, we are able to pull in examples, we are able to make it more accessible, and obviously making your research more memorable, especially if we can form that link with the audience. Another thing that we've mentioned previously would be non-verbal communication. So basically your body language. What gestures are you using? Are you using your hands a lot? Are you turning your head? Are you looking at the audience? What does your facial expression say? Are you, what is your body language? Are you crossing your arms and presenting? Are you maintaining eye contact with the audience? These are all things that we can think about, because when we do some research and we watch some videos, we realize that non-verbal communication, that's the first interaction we have with people. Even if you're walking up to present, remember the audience's eyes are on you already. So the way in which you're presenting yourself, the way in which you're engaging with them, that first few seconds actually sets the tone for our presentation, also allows you to calm your nerves as well. So it's just things for us to work on, I think, which would be quite important. So I think the next one would be adaptability. Now, this would be very specific. Like I've mentioned previously, there are some people who need a presentation to be structured because that's the way they work. And that is okay. That is actually perfectly fine, because that is the way that you work. That is the way that you present. That is your style. However, we also have those people who may just go a bit more off the cuff, shall we say. They know the content, but the way in which they structure may be a bit different. So I think it's a good skill for us to learn, obviously, balance between the two, but also how do we adjust our delivery based on the audience feedback as well as our context. Excuse me. So we think about it like this. We go up and we have 10 key points that we want to present on. Once we get to the fifth point, maybe there is a comment made or there's a question asked and it completely throws you off. Why? Because it is not within our plan in terms of this presentation. So our ability to adjust to these unexpected occurrences actually is a skill that we can develop. And obviously based on the feedback as well as the content. So if we are, say, presenting on these 10 points and it's for a particular lecture, and we notice 15 minutes in that most of the class is actually on their phone, or maybe people are actually, there's conversation going on. So what do? We have to adjust our delivery based on the feedback we're receiving from the audience. So in that case, we can maybe break for a question, or we can basically pose a discussion topic, or we can try and engage more with the audience because we realize we're losing them a bit. So being aware not only of your presentation, your body language, but also being aware of the audience and what's going on there allows us to tailor our presentation as well and basically present more effectively. I think in terms of integration of technology, we've mentioned to use multimedia more effectively and to troubleshoot any technical issues that we may have. And then we come to the point on handling questions and answers. Now, yes, it is important for us to prepare for questions, but we understand we can't prepare for every question. So this leads into the point of when we are presenting on our research or when we're presenting on a particular topic, it is important for us before the presentation to critically analyze our presentation. Identify some points which people would most likely ask, or maybe from previous experience, what are the general questions that come up? And this allows you to prepare for those questions. I think also when we are answering a question, or rather when we asked a question, it's important for us to actively listen. Now, listening versus actively listening, two different things, right? And I think we've discussed this in previous workshops. The first one, when we listen to, sometimes we listen to respond, and there's the opposite of that, which is basically where we actively listening. We truly hearing what the person says, and then we taking a minute, or maybe not a minute in terms of a presentation, but a few seconds to completely process and formulate what your response is going to be. So instead of just feeling you need to answer immediately, what we do is we take a second, we can say, that is actually a very good question. And I'd like to respond to you effectively. And then those few seconds actually gives your brain the amount of time to actually formulate what is the direction I'm going to answer this question in. By doing so, it allows you to respond confidently. Remember, if there's something, none of us know everything about everything. We're not an expert. Having a PhD does not mean that you are an expert on every single topic around the world. We know a fair amount on a particular topic. So it is okay for us to maybe not have the complete answer for a particular question. It is better for us to state, you know what, that is a very good question. And it's something that I either will investigate more, or based on my limited knowledge on that particular aspect, this is what I can best tell you, but I can always go back, do some research, and I'll get back to you in terms of the proper answer. Instead of, answering something we don't understand, and it just makes us, it affects our credibility, shall we say. Okay, I've been talking for quite a while, so I hope everyone is okay. If there's any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat or just unmute your mic as well.
Yes, Doc, there is a question from Dr. Esther on the chat.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. For an academic presentation, such as a conference, at what point should we allow our audience to respond or ask questions?
Okay, so I think when it comes to an academic conference, generally there's rules in terms of asking questions, right? So this will be for every conference that I have attended so far. Okay, let's put it this way. There's been two ways in which it's done. One of the first conferences I've ever been to, they asked for questions to only be at the end of the presentation because they did not want to disrupt the flow of the actual presenter. The second one would be obviously where questions can go on throughout the presentation, but this is more for like your keynote addresses in that regard there, shall we say. So I would think as a general rule, based on my own experience, it's good to take questions at the end of your presentation, especially at a conference. Because remember, you need to get through your presentation. They give you, say, 10 minutes for your presentation. They give you 5 minutes for questions and answers. So get through your presentation, and then afterwards, the chair will actually take questions based on your presentation. I hope that answers your question, Dr. Esther. But yeah. Okay. So we're going to go on to some practical tips for engaging basically academic presentations. Went 1 point ahead there. So I think the first one would be obviously this in the context of a contact presentation as well as this is their conference. It's important for you to step up from behind the podium to connect physically with the audience. Like we said, face the audience because obviously this forms a connection with them. They see that you're actually trying to connect to them. They'll be more receptive to what you're trying to say. So as we go through these points, we'll see that effective public speaking in academia is actually a science, for lack of a better word. There's so many different factors and characteristics that actually lead into what makes a good presenter. And it will take us a long time to actually, reach the level of some of the presenters that we see, but we will continue to push forward. We'll continue to improve. It's also good for us to use rhetorical questions because what this does is it provokes thought within your audience. And like we say, it's maintaining their attention, it's keeping them engaged on the topic as well. So we're going to the point, employ tripling, basically grouping points into threes for clarity and impact. So the way I like to, my personal way of thinking about it is when I am presenting, I don't want to talk without even a pause. Reason being, when we're having a conversation with a friend, we often leave spaces for the other person to respond. In this case, we're going to leave a space for the member of the audience to actually digest what you're saying. So by grouping your points in threes, it's obviously for clarity, impact, as well as aids in your delivery and basic digestion and retention of the information as well, which will obviously improve the discussion later on in the presentation. Then there's also use machine learning. So if there's a key point, you're going to say something along the lines of AI is actually a useful tool for PhD students. Reasons being, and then you can just rapid delivery of 4 or 5 key points. That is when you can use this sort of approach, right? And we're going to this one here. It says practice power poses before presenting to boost your confidence and presence. Now, there's nothing wrong with us actually, practicing. How exactly are we going to present ourselves? How are we going to stand? Because for many of us, we don't have 15, 20, 30 years of experience in terms of presenting at these academics. So we need to develop, we need to build these skills, and obviously it will become second nature to us later on. So how do we go about engaging our audience throughout? Well, we ask open-ended questions to encourage participation. So sometimes, and I've noticed with these sorts of workshops as well, if I ask a particular question, often you can hear a pin drop in the room. However, if we ask an open-ended question or we leave something just on the screen at a later stage in the presentation, there will be a chat that pops up or maybe even someone that unmutes and speaks. So asking these open-ended questions to encourage participation, leaving it up to the audience, and they will respond when they are comfortable, when they formulated their question as well. It's always important for us, like we said, to use, and this is a repetition of what we've done previously, just to hammer home the point. The importance of this would be to use relevant real-world examples to illustrate your points. Use your visuals, etc. And I think it's important for us to invite brief discussions or reflections during the talk. So like we do and like many of the facilitators do in these workshops, they will ask the audience, what do you think on this particular topic? Or if you have a thought, please share it with us, because how we learn is from one another and we learn through discussion. And obviously we monitor audience reactions and adjust the pace or tone accordingly. And this is something which obviously is much easier when you are in person. This is something that I have to work on quite significantly, but to use humor appropriately to build a rapport. And obviously, when in a class setting, it's much more possible. But obviously, within context, in terms of we sometimes sit for an academic presentation, and a person would have a cartoon, a scientific cartoon. Well, I've come into contact with that of maybe a chemistry joke or a biology joke or something, and it just kind of lightens the mood. It sets a tone for the rest of the presentation that what the audience can expect from you. Okay, there's not too many points remaining. So how do we go about doing this? It'll be how do we go about improving our public speaking in academia? Basically through practice and continuous improvement. So we look at it, the importance of rehearsal. So especially when we are presenting on a new topic or we're presenting, let's just say for a conference, nothing wrong with us actually rehearsing our presentation beforehand, understanding which areas do I normally get caught off. Are there particular words?
Sorry, Doc. I think one of the colleagues has their mics on.
Okay, no problem.
Let me just mute them. Okay, sorry for that, Doc. You can proceed.
Okay, no problem.
Oh, before you proceed, Doc, can you just address this question under the chat? Sorry to interject. From Dr. Ezisa. When giving practical tips, you talk about machine learning tip. Please, can you give a practical example just for clarify? Just
sorry,
for clarity, I mean.
Can you repeat that question? We broke up there for a minute.
Okay. When giving practical tips, you talk about machine learning. Here he wrote machine learning tip. Please, can you give a practical example just for clarity?
Okay, so in terms of machine learning, right? And I think we spoke about in terms of that key points. So let's just say you have a point to make in your presentation. So I'll use a different example. So if I am presenting on my research topic, which is anti-cancer drug delivery, right? And I'm presenting to an audience that is knowledgeable. Now, I don't want to go through the entire story of, oh no, you know what, gold and palladium nanoparticles are good for anti-cancer drug delivery because of they do this, they do this, they do this. So what will I do? I'll be like, some of the advantages of the use of, let's say, these noble metal nanoparticles would include, and then I would just go machine learning after that, like bullet points. So I'll just say improved biocompatibility, reduced toxicity, improved deliverability of your particular agents. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if there is, for example, a key point that you want to highlight, you want to say that this particular point of my research is important, and here are the reasons why. If there's multiple reasons, that way you can use that approach of machine learning. So if you're going to say, we can use a different example, and we spoke about AI. So if you are trying to convince a particular, let's just say you're convincing students that AI is dangerous in terms of their academic development. Now, this is a key statement that you're making. So how do you go about it? You can say AI is dangerous because it prevents you from reading whatever else you want to say. However, if you want it to be impactful, you can actually run through them quite quickly because students will actually respond to that. You can say, AI is a useful tool, however, it does have its disadvantages. Some of those disadvantages include lack of engagement, lack of domain knowledge, preventing people from actually reading and writing in terms of academia. So you can run through those points quite quickly. So I hope that answers your question, Doctor. But okay, if not, then please you can pop a clarifying question in the chat and I'll answer it to the best of my ability. In terms of our practice and continuous improvement, obviously, it's always important for us to seek feedback from our peers and mentors. So if we're presenting at a particular research group, ask for feedback and not just, oh, your presentation, you're very well done. I'm very, we want constructive feedback. We want to be like, what, you presented this topic, but certain aspects were not clear in your explanations. And that's how we will improve as well. And then there's also the option of obviously recording and reviewing your presentation. In that way, that you can actually review your body language. How is it? What is the audience seeing? Because sometimes what we are presenting and what the audience seeing, there's a disconnect. So by looking at ourselves, we're able to actually make those adjustments. And then obviously commit to ongoing skill development as well, which is always important. Attending sessions. There's lots of online resources as well, and even everything leading up to TED Talks in terms of public speaking. There's many different resources available. So how do we so we have identified the challenges at the start of this presentation. So how do we go about overcoming them? In terms of the managing of our nerves, if we know that we've prepared adequately, that obviously is 50% of the stress gone. So make sure you prepare, put contingencies in place. So in your slide notes, you can always have potential questions and answers, on a particular topic, or maybe you'll need specific stats that will strengthen your argument. We can always add that in there. Breathing exercises are found to be actually quite useful. And for me, I think before I go out to present, especially at a research conference where there's a big, maybe there's a big audience, I'll sit for a few seconds, before I'm supposed to go up, and I'll just calm myself down. I don't know if this will work for everyone, but that's what works for me. But there's various different breathing exercises you can do to actually calm yourself down. And it's important that when we step up on that stage, we're not stepping up with anxiety and anxiousness. We're actually stepping up in a positive light. We're excited to present, we're excited. And that is how we positively talk to ourselves and try it out, and hopefully it works, because it's worked for me, it's worked for colleagues who have shown these techniques to me. So we hope it'll work for you as well. And then we have positive visualization. So how we see a particular presentation before it even starts is important. So if we see there being a good outcome, now remember, we're not saying overconfidence, we're saying a positive outcome in terms of, I'm excited to give this presentation. However you speak to yourself, this would help you with managing your nerves. So it goes away from a thing of, I need to do well because of A, B, and C, to I want to do well because I want my message to come across. The way in which we talk to ourselves is obviously very important. How do we go about handling difficult questions? All of us have had difficult questions asked of us before. It's part of academia, it's part of how we grow. And I think accepting that at the first stage is that we don't know everything about everything. But what a PhD generally teaches you is how to gather, process information, and how basically to logically work through a question and a research problem, shall we say. So when you get a difficult question, firstly, stay calm, ask clarifying questions, because the last thing you want to do is to answer something that's not related to the question at all, and respond honestly. If you have not had too much of experience with that particular technique, or you have not considered that approach, be honest, and that honesty will be appreciated by the audience. In doing so, you can say, what, that is a very good question. To be honest with you, we have not considered this approach, but it's definitely something we will take into consideration for future studies. However, based on the information that I have, this is the best response that I can give you. And you can speak from your experience and your knowledge as well. In that way, we don't ever want to project to be something that we're not, or that we know something that we don't. So taking that into consideration is also important. I think obviously how we deal with technical issues is always important for us to have backups and stay composed. email the presentation to yourself on your work email, your personal email the night before. Obviously, it must not have any important data relating to the university, but have backups stored online. So even if your computer crashes the next day, you know you've got backups, because unfortunately, these things only happen when you need them to not happen. And the last point that I'd like to speak on would be, let's just go through some of the key takeaways for presenters and things that we can all hopefully learn and work on. So preparation and practice are critical in terms of effective academic public speaking. We need to understand our audience, we need to know our audience, and thereafter tailor our message accordingly. They can't be a blanket approach in terms of presenting, and these are skills that we will pick up. And I think, I came across an example once and they said, and I apologize for always using this example, but it's based on my background. I'm more from, a science background, and they'll say, who is a good communicator of science? What do you consider to be a good communicator of science? And the answer would be to be able to explain the same concept to any person at any level of study. So whether you go to a primary school, whether you go to a high school, whether you go to undergraduate, postgraduate, PhD, you are able to tailor your message on your research. And then we can start to consider ourselves moving in the direction of being good communicators of our research. So it's important for us to structure our presentation clearly and logically. Obviously, see it from the point of the audience member, and therefore we can identify the gaps or maybe certain parts that don't link up. It's important for us to use visuals to enhance, not to overshadow your message. Obviously, we just don't want pictures up on the screen because it looks like you have not done any preparation. So even one or two key points would aid to it. Engage your audience and handle challenges and challenging questions with composure. And obviously, we want to continuously improve. This is not a destination, as they say, it's a journey. So we will continue to improve as we go through it. Seek essential feedback, constructive feedback from your peers. Don't just ask for the good stuff, ask for areas that you can improve on, and practice regularly. That could just be in your mind, it could be basically in your conversations. Take every opportunity that comes your way, and we will work towards becoming effective communicators, effective presenters in terms of academia. So just over an hour in terms of the presentation, but I'd like to thank you all for your attention and for your questions. If there are any questions at this point, we leave the floor open to you. And with that, I'll hand back to Mr. Nkosi. Thank you, Nkosi.
Thank you so much, Dr. David, for such a very informative and insightful presentation. Colleagues, now we open the floor for questions. If you do have any questions, just unmute your mic. I have enabled all your mics. You can just unmute your mic or ask your question or make your contribution. Any input is welcome, or alternatively, just type under the chat or under Q&A. I will go through those questions or comment. There is a comment from Dr. Ezisa. I think chewing gum just before the presentation may help. It works for me. That was a comment from Dr. Ezisa.
Thank you, Dr. Ezisa. That I actually will try that the next time. That seems quite interesting. To calm your nerves, take your mind away from what we envision is going to come. So no, thank you for that suggestion. Is there any other tips that anyone has in terms of what has worked for them in terms of their presenting, how they become more comfortable, presenting to a wider audience? I think while we wait for some questions, if I can just say, I think when it comes to presenting, it takes on a different perspective when we are presenting to our peers. So when we're presenting at a lecture, we know that we have deep knowledge, and generally you would hope to know more than your students that you're presenting to, that you're lecturing. However, when it comes to presenting to maybe senior members of staff or at an academic conference, I think we need to take that into consideration as well, because there is an element of nerves that comes up here, because some of these people can ask some very technical questions that you may not have the answer to. So just something for us to consider as well, and maybe some feedback from members of the audience if anyone has any experience with that.
Okay, thank you for that, Doc. There is another question from Dr. Opeyemi. Thanks for the presentation. How can one handle a very confrontational and difficult member in an audience that considers any part of a presentation at a conference as irrelevant?
That is a good question. I think there's a twofold, there's two things to consider here, right? So the first one is at all times in our presentations, we obviously have developed these presentations. We've put in the hard work in terms of our research, and we are just telling our story. So having confidence in what you are presenting is actually very important as well. So that's the first thing. Be solid in your understanding, be solid in what you present. You need to believe in what you're presenting, shall we say. If there is someone who is very confrontational or a difficult member of the audience, do not react to them, is what I would say. You answer the questions to the best of your ability, and if they keep pushing on a particular topic, I feel at that particular point, it's up to the chair of that particular session to actually step in and actually moderate, because that's their job, right? To actually moderate what is going on there. So if there is, if I read your question again, how can one handle a very confrontational and difficult member in an audience? You answer to the best of your ability and you only answer the questions. You try not to be emotional, which I know can be very difficult sometimes. And if someone considers the part of the presentation at a conference as irrelevant, this does not reflect the views of every member of the audience. Remember that. Remember, we said that we can, if we look at a lecture, when we go to lecture people, when we go to a conference, when we go to a workshop, we can't make everyone happy. And everyone, there'll be some people who will always find things that we can work on, shall we say. So think about it in that way there. Don't let it negatively affect your view of the actual presentation. Just handle it the best you can. Answer the questions, listen to what they're saying, and if you are unable to provide them with any further answers based on their follow-up questions, then maybe just hand over to the chair, or the chair should step in at that point. But I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that, Doc. There is another question from Dr. Emila. In interdisciplinary settings, do we maintain our disciplinary jargon or actively use more generalized or vulgar terms to engage a wider audience?
Thank you, Dr. Smith. I think that is a good question, and it's an important one. I would say if you are going to use your disciplinary jargon, I think it would be important for you to maybe provide a definition maybe before that. But obviously, that's going to eat up into the time of your presentation. So if you are able to use more simpler language, shall we say, you can move in that direction. But let's just look at your question. In interdisciplinary settings, do we maintain our disciplinary jargon or actively use more generalized vague terms to engage a wide audience? I would say use more generalized terms. I wouldn't say vague, because vague obviously would leave the audience wondering as to, what exactly they're talking about. So maybe instead of, let's just say if I am presenting and I want to speak on the apoptotic effect, shall we say, it's something that is commonly known within our field, but in a different discipline, it may not actually be known very well. So what do I do there? Instead of using that particular specific jargon, I'll say we wanted to determine what would be the effect of cell death, or what would contribute to cell death, something like that, program cell death. So instead of using that specific jargon, you can use a more precise definition of it, which should not take you too much longer as well, and hopefully will be able to improve understanding throughout the audience. So hopefully that answers your answer, Dr. Schmidt. I'll hand back to you, Nkosi.
Yes, I was just typing under the Q&A. I was answering Dr. Murangi. The presentation of this workshop as well as the recording will be uploaded to your respective module communities as well as the RCT management system. Module communities are supervisor community as well as a PDRF community. So for RCT MS, it's under ULink, and then you go to services. The last option, which is RCTMS, that is where you will register your profile or log in, and you will have access to all our previous workshops workshop recording as well as the presentation slides. So there is a question from Dr. Dube. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. It's amazing to learn how we can avoid certain mistakes we usually make. It's key to develop effective public speaking in academia skills. So that was just an addition from Dr. Dube. Okay, I see there is a hand up from Dr. Izisa. You can just unmute your mic and ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Okay, thank you, Dr. David, for the very wonderful presentation. Now, one of the things that I think causes an audience to disconnect from the presentation or sometimes even sleep off is when the presenter has a monotonous voice. Yeah. Now, some people naturally have multi-tone voice, while some people naturally have monotonous voices. Now, could you please advise on maybe ways or methods or techniques that one can apply to, work on his or her voice?
Okay. Okay, that's a very good point, Dr. Z. So thank you. So when it comes to the way that we are speaking, and obviously I use the example of sometimes a lecturer may be monotone versus someone who may be, fluctuate between highs and lows. I think at the start, this is something that we would actually have to actively work on. When I say actively work on, the first point is identifying what is your speaking or presenting style. So by doing that, we'll say, and this is the best way to do it, it would be to actually sit in front of your laptop, as if you are in an online presentation. And in that way there, you actually record yourself presenting as you normally would. And then thereafter, go back and watch the footage. Now, sometimes it's a bit difficult for us to watch and listen to ourselves present, but just, power through it. And then you'll be able to identify what exactly is your presentation style. And the question that you asked in terms of what are some techniques that we go in terms of, varying our voice between different areas, I think that at the start will be something which is you'll have to actively do. So if we are talking on a particular, let's just say I'm introducing this topic, right, as an example. So at the start of this presentation, if I am introducing what the topic is, I need to keep in mind that if I don't actively engage with the audience, if I don't sound passionate and excited about it, the audience is not going to be interested as well, and I can lose them within the first few minutes. So that is why at the start of it, I will, and I'll be energetic. I will try and to be as engaging as possible, as welcoming as possible. So I think that is some of the things that we can actually work on. So identify some key areas in terms of your presentation style that you want to incorporate. So do you want to seem as approachable? Thereafter, you will add little comments afterwards. Do you want to seem passionate, or you want your passion to come through? In that way, there we know that we'll have to highlight certain points, and we can, obviously speak differently than others. So I think in that way, it's not something that all of us would pick up automatically, but it is definitely a skill that we can work on. And I think about an example, and I'm sorry for going on. It's just an interesting question that you posed. I think there was many years ago there was a postdoc that was in our research group, and this postdoc was absolutely brilliant. In Dr. Habib actually was her name. I don't know if she'll ever watch this, but Dr. Habib was absolutely fantastic at her research. I mean, anything research related you wanted to ask her, she would be there. But she was like many of us, she was more of a reserved person. And so when it came time, the first time that I heard her present, I was completely blown away. And the reason being was she had actually worked on her presenting skills. And the person that you would speak to in the lab versus the person who's presenting it seemed like two different people. But that just shows you that even if by nature, like myself, you're a bit more of a reserved person, when it comes to presenting, that does not mean that has to be your persona in terms of presenting. You have confidence in your topic, you have confidence in your ability, and obviously these are skills that we can learn. So I hope that answers your question, as well as provide some further background as well. And apologies for going on. about that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Lorenzo. I see there is another question from Dr. Ariel. Are there techniques to present in a language we do not master very well?
Thank you, Dr. Ariel. I think not so much techniques. I think this would lead more into your preparation. And please don't misunderstand that I'm saying you're not preparing well. What I'm trying to say is if we are presenting in a language, or let's just say even an area that we are not very familiar with, like we will have an understanding of the topic or we have an understanding of the language, it is important for us to practice our presentation in that case, specifically on particular words or sentences that may actually cause us some issues. So while there's no techniques that I actually can think of at the moment, besides some different approaches such as practicing, how your sentence construction is going to be in terms of you delivering a particular point, rehearsing particular technical words, shall we say, so that it comes across the way that you know it. Because we need to remember sometimes when we're presenting it, if we make a single mistake, that mistake weighs heavily on us. And by doing that, we actually we start stressing. And what happens? The rest of the presentation just goes downhill from there. So I think when it comes to master or presenting in a language that you do not master very well, I think it's important.
Oh,
My name is
sorry,
yeah, no, no
Doc,
problem.
for
Yes,
that.
no problem.
Let me just unmute. Colleagues, please let me see. Okay. Colleagues, please make sure your mic is muted when you are not asking a question or making any contribution. You can continue, Dr. Laurent.
Thank you, Kosi. So, Dr. Ariel, I think those are the only two tips that I can give you, but I think what you actually pose a very interesting question and it's something maybe that we'd like to discuss a bit further. So if you want to pop me an email, then hopefully I can do a bit more research and speak to a few colleagues and we can get back to you and we'll share that in the community. I'll add it to the slides as well. Because obviously we understand that when we take on a language as our second language, in terms of presenting, it can cause certain issues. So yeah, I think that let's just say this, right? And just to answer your questions, hopefully a bit more concisely. Number one would be, in that case, practice what you want to say. Have an outline or a script of the key points you want to cover. Okay. The next one is identify some of the key words which may pose a bit of difficulty, especially when presenting under pressure. So when we're presenting, there is a level of pressure that's on us, and obviously words that we sometimes have no issue saying can cause an issue. So try and do that. And the next one would be, I see there's a hand that was put up here. And the next one that would be in terms of, and the thing has just slipped my mind at this point, but I apologize, but it will come back to me. I think I just got distracted. I think there is another question. Are there methods one could apply to help one rebound should one make a mistake? For instance, a temporary loss of composure or missing one lines, etc. during presentation. Okay, so let's use the example of what happened to me literally 5 seconds ago, right? My brain actually just went blank from the main point I actually wanted to make, and it will come back to me. I'm sorry, Dr. Ariel. So how do we go about doing that? I thought, well, for me personally, when I'm presenting, if I have, and this is just my own personal style, right? If I have each and every point that I want to discuss up on the slide, for me, it works against me. Reason being is because I know I sometimes jump between topics. I present the way I speak very often. And so I know if I miss something out and it is present on the slide, it actually adds to my stress because I'm like, oh, the audience knows I missed something. However, if I just put up the key points there and I obviously speak to it, even if you miss a key point at slide 1, you can always bring it in to slide 3 when you actually remember, or you can add it to your presenter notes. So your question specifically says, are there methods one could help apply to help one rebound should one make a mistake. I think the first thing for us to remember is that none of us are perfect. We are going to make mistakes. You know, we have to expect it. Each of us wants a perfect presentation, but it's very rarely possible. So what do we do if we happen to have a mistake? You can do one of two things. You can just say, you know, I apologize. Apologize. This is the correct value, or you can say, I'd just like to add this particular point, shall we say. If you say in terms of a temporary loss of composure, then that's fine. Then you take a few seconds. Just take a few seconds. You need to calm yourself down, and obviously you continue. So each slide that you think about, if you have a presentation of 10 slides, once you move on to slide number 2, you forget everything that happened on the first slide, essentially, right? So you treat each slide as its own presentation. So if you made a mistake that is in a previous presentation, that does not negatively impact the rest of your presentation. What are you doing now? You're going to do better in this slide. And I know these are some general examples that I'm giving you, but these are just things that I kind of work on. And in terms of missing your one-liners example during your presentation, again, if it's up on the screen and you miss it, then you can always discuss it later on. It's not the end of the world. You can always draw parallels between, or you say, I'd just like to add maybe a point that we did not cover, or I did not cover in as much detail, or that we skipped over. You don't have to present it as being an outlet, oh, I'm so sorry for making this mistake. You're like, I'd just like to revisit the slide to discuss a point that we did not cover in detail. So the way in which we respond to these sorts of challenges, and I think the important thing is we need to expect these challenges, because we are presenting very often to a very knowledgeable audience, or even to students who may have good questions. So understand that mistakes are part of it. We try to limit them as much as possible, and obviously we just try to move on. I don't know what else to say. I hope that answers your question. I'll hand over back to you, Mr. Nkosi.
Thank you for that talk. Colleagues, I don't know if anyone has a question at the moment. If you do have, just type under chat, or alternatively, you can just unmute your mic and ask a question. So in the meantime, I have posted, sorry, Doc, I have posted the feedback evaluation under the chat. We kindly request you to take your few minutes and fill that feedback in. It helps us in terms of preparing workshops, as well as to improve our service delivery. So going forward, we'll be taking the register from that feedback evaluation to issue certificates. So we kindly request you colleagues to make sure that you fill that feedback, and also to help us in improving our service delivery. And also I have posted the RCD management system link under chat, which is the platform. You can just click on the link, or alternatively log into your Ulink using your UJ account. And under the services, the last option is RCDMS. So just populate all the information, create your own password, and you will be good to see all our upcoming events, register for those events, and also have access to previous workshop, which includes the recordings as well as the presentation of each workshop that has already passed, and all our upcoming events as well. So, okay, I see there is a question or comment from Dr. Smith. Thank you very much, Dr. Lorenzo and the RCT for such a great series of training materials. Thank you for that comment, Dr. Smith. We really appreciate. So I don't know, anyone with a question, colleagues, before I can officially close the session? But before that, I hand over to you, Dr. Lorenzo, if you have some closing remarks that you would like to make before we can officially close the session, if there are no questions at the moment.
Thank you, Nkosi. I just want to, the thing I want to say popped back into my head, Dr. Ariel. In terms of your question, are there techniques to present in a language we do not master very well? I think, like we said, preparation, reviewing, but also structure your presentation in such a way that you don't have to use overly complicated languages. And like we're saying, practice your presentation, practice the direction in which you want your presentation to go. And also, if we are presenting, for example, if I'm presenting, which I'm not able to do, by the way. So if I'm presenting in a language that maybe I'm not too familiar with, I would approach it the same way as if I'm presenting on a topic that maybe I'm relatively new to. So if I'm presenting my research proposal on a particular topic that is new to me, how would I approach that? And that's how I'm trying to draw some parallels. What I would do is everything we've said previously, but also take your time, right? Especially if you are presenting in a language that you have not yet fully mastered. Take your time and present. So ensure that even if you're going a bit slower, that your message is coming across. And you'll notice that as you go, your confidence will actually improve. And in doing so as well, you'd be able to sort of direct your presentation a bit better. But yeah. Okay, and thank you, Dr. Schmidt. We really appreciate that. Like we said, we have actually sent out a communication in terms of a meeting. Just to quickly let everyone know, for the postdocs of UJ. So the invitation has been sent out. We'll send it out again today. This is just going to be a session in terms of we want to get some feedback from you onto what trainings would be valuable for each of you. And in doing so, what we'll hopefully be able to put some further trainings together to assist you in your various aspects. And the last thing I'd like to close off by saying is that when it comes to academic presentations, we all are obviously working towards this. We are all striving for excellence as always. Just always be kind with ourselves, try and learn from our mistakes. And eventually we will reach the point where we feel that, we are actually presenting well. But up until then, we'll continue to improve. But if there's anything we can help with, please feel free to pop us an email. You can email Mr. Nkosi, myself, or us at Supervision Course, and we will respond to you as soon as we can. But other than that, I hand over back to Mr. Nkosi to close. And thank you once again for the turnout. We really appreciate your support, and we hope to see you in future presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lorenzo, for such a very informative and insightful presentation. I see some comments from Dr. Abraham. Thank you for this insightful and well-timed presentation. I was really imparted for good. Another one from Dr. Esther. Thank you for the brilliant presentation. Dr. Izaso, thank you, Dr. Lorenzo. I have learned quite a lot in the last 1 hour. Thanks again. And Dr. Michael, thank you so much. Thank you so much, colleagues, for your contribution and for your feedback to hear how impactful this workshop that we are providing to you. We hope to see you in more upcoming workshops, and we kindly request you, colleagues, to make sure that you do register for those workshops. It helps us and ensures that we issue the correct certificate of attendance. So thank you so much to everyone for taking your time for attending this workshop. We will send out a communication for other workshops which are happening throughout this week and next week as well. Be in a lookout for those announcements. Colleagues, sorry for the background noise. I don't know where it's coming from. Let me just... I think one of the colleagues has their mics on. Let me just check. Okay. Sorry for that, colleagues. One of the colleagues has their mics on. Thank you so much for your attendance once again. Colleagues, as I've mentioned, that I've shared the link for RCTMS, which is the platform that will simplify everything. You will not be receiving any announcement or any email, but you will just receive a communication directly from the system, whereby you can have a calendar of all the workshops for upcoming months, and you can book for any workshop across all our portfolios, as well as you can access the recordings of any previous workshop, regardless of which portfolio is it coming from. And also you can generate your own attendance certificate. just after you have attended the workshop. As long as you have registered via the system for that particular workshop, we guarantee you that you will be able to generate your certificate of attendance. Once again, I would like to notify colleagues that have emailed for their certificate to be rectified. I will just send those certificates probably by the end of today with the correct details of colleagues. So if you didn't receive any certificates of attended, but you have attended any of the workshop in April and March and Feb, we kindly request you to send us your details, and then we will double check with our attended register to see if you indeed attended that particular workshop, and we will be happy to issue a certificate of attendance for your attendance. So thank you so much, colleagues, once again. I am officially ending the session now. You can have a great day further. Thank you for your attendance, and thank you to our facilitator once again, Dr. Lorenzo David, for taking your time and facilitating this wonderful and insightful workshop. Thank you, colleagues. You can have a great day further.
Thank you. Goodbye.